here we are. The reason you were here is to hear Diane introduce our speaker. Diane, please come on up. Everybody, welcome our favorite associate athletic director.
Okay, I feel that I must step in and do the last part of the sports report since we were overlooked, but that's okay. You know, it's a great time to be in Tennessee, whether you love football, baseball, whatever. But I just got to brag a second or two. You know, obviously our football team won this last weekend. Pretty excited about that. Murray State, yes, we know we should have beat them, and that's good, and we did. For those of you who like to stay up and watch Colorado State, you can see them in person this Saturday night against the Blue Raiders at homecoming. Homecoming parade will be at 11 o'clock. We play at 6. So it should be a wild and crazy weekend. We also have the Hall of Fame this weekend, and that's a really great time for us. You know, I usually travel with volleyball, but I'll be staying home this weekend because one young lady going into the Hall of Fame was in my first recruiting class ever 40 years ago, Miss Janet Ross. Hometown local girl, Anne-Marie Lanning Brents will be going into the Hall of Fame. LaRon Dindy from a couple of years back that played for Kermit. And several more. And so it's just a great time to be a Blue Raider. I'm going to brag a little bit shamelessly. I've been traveling with volleyball, and they've struggled the last couple of years. And I took a lot of ribbing because my son got married 2 weeks ago, and I didn't get to go with the volleyball team to Auburn, and they promptly went down there. Sorry, Auburn fans, but they promptly went down there and beat number 25 Auburn and won the entire tournament. So I'm pretty excited about that. And as you know, I mentioned earlier that in the spring, softball also defeated a top 10 team in Alabama. We were 1 home run away from going to the Super Regional. And they also beat, you know, top 25 teams. So I'm feeling pretty good about that. And then our women's basketball team was ranked in the top 25 several times throughout the year. So I'm feeling good about the sports I'm over. You know, I don't know when I'm going to be put in charge of Nick, but I know when I am that he's going to be in the top 25 too. Well, that beats him. You know, but I do want to say, if you have been around Murphy Center in the last few years, it has indeed been exciting. And, you know, this is Nick going into his 6th year, I believe. And I got to tell you, last year was one more exciting year. And the thing I like most is that the kids perform on and off the court for our men's and our women's team. And that's pretty exciting. You know, we had an undefeated streak going on there for about 2 years. And that's pretty exciting. And that's because of people like you coming in and supporting our athletes. And we don't take that lightly. But if you came last year, you got to see Nick McDevitt's team go up against the top team in the conference, FAU, who was ranked at the time, like in, 21. We promptly beat them, sent them on their way. We faced them again in the conference tournament, and they beat us on a last-second shot to advance to the finals and then move right on to the Final Four. So, you know, we know that we've got the right man in charge of our men's basketball program, and I know he's going to tell you a little bit more about it. But I just got to tell you, I'm very proud because we work with some incredible coaches. And as we were talking at our table earlier about NIL deals and all kinds of things, all of a sudden, sometimes players might make more than the coaches coaching them. And that's kind of a crazy world, but it makes their job sometimes a little bit harder. But we know that Nick and his staff are going to do the right things, and they're going to bring in the type of athletes that we want to represent our program. So without further ado, our men's basketball coach, Nick McDevitt.
That's pretty good. Yeah, I know, right? Well, thanks, Diane, and thank you guys for allowing me to be here. As John said earlier, it's a beautiful day and a beautiful morning, so like some of my college professors, I felt like moving the class outside, as nice as it is. But thanks again for allowing me to be here and share some things with you. First off, I want to share a little bit about this year's group. Going back a year with our team, we had 2 guys that graduated and we had 4 that transferred. All right. So with that, we had the opportunity to bring in 6 new players. And you kind of do that these days. They're used to it was kind of a all through the high school ranks. You're recruiting high school players, and all of a sudden you can lose that many players and you get real young real fast. And with 6 freshmen on your team. With our newcomers, though, due to the transfer portal and other ways, our 6 newcomers, we have 3 transfers, 2 high school players, and 1 junior college player. So it's allowed us to stay old. And I really like this group. With our newcomers, we've got a center, a transfer from Iowa, who's 6'11", about 305 pounds. He'd have to come through the double door instead of the single door over here. He is a big human being. And one of our freshmen is a 6'11", 225 pound young man. And so with those 2 with some of our returners, we've got a 6'8" transfer, a 6'8" freshman wing. So we have the biggest team that we've had since I've been here, which is one thing that I think as you look at in college basketball, at least in our sport, in college athletics, there are some leagues I think you can afford to be a little small or a little young. This isn't one of them. And we in CUSA, we just feel like we need to have size. You look around and sometimes in some other leagues, speaking of age, you can afford to be young because the young guys are the most talented. You know, they're going to be in the NBA a year from now. It's very difficult to get those kind of young guys in Conference USA and the American League and the athletic team. Most of the time, those guys are playing at Duke for 1 year and they're gone, or Kansas for 1 year and they're gone. So we've tried to stay both old and big. And I really like the way that this group has come together and formed over the last several months. In the summer, you know, our guys showed up June 1st. And so we've really been somewhat practicing since then. What the NCAA allows you to do, for those that you may not know, is in the summer, you're allowed to work out with your players for 8 weeks. You have to designate those 8 weeks before you start. But you're allowed to work for 8 hours a week for 8 weeks. And so we've been practicing really since June 1st. And I said this earlier, but I really like the way that this group is starting to come around. We haven't played any games other than our overseas trip, which I'll get to in a minute. So we haven't faced a lot of adversity, and guys aren't quite sure how much or maybe how little they're going to play. And so, you know, the attitudes are good, but I really like how we share the ball, the size that we have throughout those practices. One thing that we do a little bit different in the summer, I don't know if it's different, but we try to be different, is in the summer, or at least in the off season, on Fridays, we have something we call road games. And our road games are real early in the morning, or at least for them as a college student athlete. We go at 6 o'clock in the morning. At least for myself, we're usually, my wife and I are already awake. We've got a 5-year-old and a 9-year-old. So they're getting us up, whether it's Tuesday or Saturday, early. But on Fridays in the off season, we have road games. And so they don't know what we're going to do. But it's usually a fairly intense workout. It's not always at the same spot. And so we try to get them a little out of their comfort zone right away. And some of that is the early, and some of it is as soon as 6 o'clock hits, we're exercising. And so we do that so that they're prepared for, or at least more prepared for, real road games when the season comes. There's going to be some adversity. You don't know, the surroundings will be a little bit different. You don't know perhaps where you're going to eat pregame meal. The hotel you stay in is going to be different than your own bed. The air conditioning unit might be making some noise that you're not used to, and it keeps you up all night. So all of a sudden you're a little uncomfortable. And so what we try to train our players to do is get used to being uncomfortable. get used to having some adversity in your life and figure out a way to overcome it. Just figure out a way to overcome it, because that's really the difference in athletics in the good teams and the great teams. The good teams win all their home games. And Diane mentioned a minute ago, we've been pretty fortunate at home. We've 29-2 at home in our last 31 home games. The great teams figure out a way to win on the road. You know, they can figure out the adversity of the crowd noise, the adversity of the uncomfortable surroundings, all the things that come in with playing on the road. Some of the uncomfortable is how good the other guy is. You know, that gets uncomfortable too. But what we try to do is train them in that way as well during the off season. And one thing that our strength coach, his name's Brandon Buskey, he's a former, he was in the Army for a while. Now he's still in the Army Reserve. But one thing he talks to our players about all the time is the importance of your training. And you've heard the term before about rising to the occasion. And he tells our players all the time, there's no such thing. You're not going to rise to the occasion. And this is a Navy SEAL term or a lot of Navy SEALs use. You're not going to rise to the occasion. You fall to the level of your training. You know, there is no such thing as rising to the occasion. You're going to fall to the level of your training. So make sure that your training is hard. You've figured out ways to have your guys being uncomfortable and overcoming those kind of things. In the summer, I just mentioned some of our road games. This summer, we were allowed to take our team to Italy. We went to Italy for 10 days, the second and third week of August. Now, the reason for that is what the NCAA allows you to do is once every 4 years, you can go on a foreign tour. They say you can't play anybody in the United States or anybody from the United States during the summer. So years and years ago, teams started figuring that out, reading the rule book, said, well, that means I can play somebody else on foreign soil. And so we're going overseas. We're going to play and gain advantage on the competition. Well, the reason they say once every 4 years is the big boys that have tons and tons of money, they'd go every summer, where they leave behind, you know, some of the smaller schools that can't afford to ever go. So what they allowed you to do is once every 4 years going on a foreign tour. So the foreign tour allows you 10 additional practices before you go. So I spoke earlier about 8 weeks, 8 hours a week. It afforded us 2 additional weeks where the hours are kind of unlimited. And so we feel like we're a little bit ahead of where we should be, ahead of where we otherwise would be without those kind of foreign tours. So we took our team to Italy. We got to play 2 teams, 2 international teams, semi-pro teams. Got to visit Rome, Florence, and Milan before coming back. It was honestly a terrific experience. It's about my 4th or 5th time to Europe, my first time to Italy. I would highly recommend it to anybody that's looking to travel internationally. It was a terrific trip because obviously we've got some young men that haven't been afforded that kind of an opportunity before to travel to a place like that. So we were able to see the Roman Colosseum, go to the Vatican, spend about 30 minutes inside the Sistine Chapel, and seeing some guys that haven't been far outside of Chicago or very far outside of Brooklyn, where they grew up, to spend a day inside of the Vatican and getting a chance to see the Sistine Chapel, the ceiling painted by Michelangelo, is something that we feel very blessed to have been able to afford them those kind of opportunities. Obviously, the basketball is really good and really important, but to be able to provide those kind of opportunities in the summer was also something that we felt was really important. This coming year, our schedule is finished. We will play this year the most home games that we've played in 51 years, the most regular season home games. Scheduling is getting more and more crazy. It's getting harder just because there is quite a bit of money now in college athletics for the teams that are really up here. They're buying games. They're able to pay players through NIL. So scheduling gets more difficult. You might ask why. Think about scheduling somebody like UT Martin. UT Martin up the road is a game that has been very attractive. Go back all the way to the OVC days, Austin Peay, Tennessee State. Now the part of the issue is the Auburns, of the Tennessees, of the Vanderbilts can pay those guys $100,000 to go play them. And so when you're trying to get those guys on the schedule and then invite them, let's play a home and home with each other. Well, a school like UNC Asheville or an Austin P could play five games against those guys, and you raise $500,000 in 5 games for $100,000 each. And so for the schools at our level, Western Kentucky, UAB, Middle Tennessee, filling out your schedule is increasingly more difficult. And so we were very proud of the fact that we were able to get that many, not only get that many games, but particularly get that many home games. So we're really looking forward to the schedule. We've got our first road game, speaking of road games, is December 19th. So obviously the opposite of that is the whole month of November and the first part of December, we're at home. And so we're again excited about the games with Western Carolina, Wofford, Stephen F. Austin, Belmont, kept UAB on the schedule, even though they've moved leagues. So it's really rounded out into an exciting schedule. Our first road game is at St. Mary's. St. Mary's will be top 20 in the country. And so we're trying to really make our road games in the preseason here very difficult, because that's going to be really difficult when we go on the road to play those guys. Getting to our team, one of the things that we've talked about with this year's group is, what are their expectations? You know, where do they see this team? How good do they think we can get? How good do you think you can get? And I bring that up because the thing that we ask them a lot are, do the E's align? Do the E's, the letter E, do they align? So does your effort and does your enthusiasm and does your energy every day, does that equal the expectations that you have for the season? Because we try to talk to them a lot about just control what you can control. You can control your toughness, you can control your effort, you can control your attitude. So as you're controlling those things, also think about, do the E's align? You know, where do you think this team can get to? Well, if that's getting to the NCAA tournament, is that getting to the Sweet 16? Are you dreaming about what FAU just did out of our league? Are you dreaming about the Final Four? Well, if those are some of the things you dream about, and those are some of the things that you're beginning to expect of yourself and of our group, then make sure on a daily basis that your effort, your energy, and your enthusiasm, those E's, match up with what you think the expectations should be of this team. Before I go over a couple other things, are there questions on anything so far? Yes, sir.
Coach, you start every season with certain expectations and certain mile markers. I'm curious what type of quantifiable road, not roadblocks, but road signs you look at to see how far and is the team progressing to your expectations?
No, that's a good question. At this point in the season, one of the things we're looking at is individually are guys making progressions. So we try to chart like your makes, your misses, your turnovers, your rebounds, those kind of things in practices. Our strength coach is doing the same thing in the weight room. Is this young man making gains? Is he getting bigger, faster, stronger? And so if those things are kind of flatline for them individually, it's hard to imagine that we're doing this as a group. Same kind of thing, watching film, like we've been going over this for the last 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, and you're still making the same mistakes. So those are some of the bigger roadblocks. I think last year's group had a big roadblock, and we told them this before the season even started. 2 years ago, we won 26 ball games. We won a share of the Conference USA regular season championship and had almost the entire team coming back. And so we told our team before the season started, it was about this time, actually a little bit earlier, that we felt like last year's team would be the hardest group to coach. And I think no matter who was in that locker room or who the coach was, that what was going on in the locker room would be the hardest group to coach. And the reason is the returners is winning 26, is winning 27. Is that enough now? Because you just did that. So the roadblock was, I want to win 26, but I want some more minutes. I'd like to win 26 again, but I'd like some more shots than I got last year. I'd like to win 26, but can we run some more plays for me? So it's kind of the deep disease of me. Those teams are hard to coach. Actually, Florida Atlantic's coach, Dusty Mays, a good friend of mine. We actually had this conversation a couple of months ago because they just went to the Final Four, have all those guys coming back. And so Dusty's a terrific coach. But that was kind of my advice to say, it will be, in my opinion, it'll be the hardest group to coach. I hope it's not for you. Because you guys had a great year, and I hope you go 1 or 2 games further, particularly now that they're out of the league. But I think it'll be his biggest challenge is what we did last year enough. You know, I'm okay just going to the Sweet 16 if that means that I go from 12 points to 20 points a game. So I think that's one of the going back to us, the markers are the physical traits, but the reason I said I really like our team and what I saw in the summer during our 2 games in Italy is that we were unselfish. We've got 6 newcomers. I think they've blended quite well with our returning players, both on and off the court. But I didn't see selfish players, and you can get that a little bit. We've got one of our transfers, led his team in minutes, second in points, first in rebounds, first in steals before he got here. So does that guy come in wanting to just do that for us? If he does, how's that make some of the returning guys feel? Got another young man, he was the second lead scorer in his old institution. Where's his head at? Those are the things you just don't know in recruiting. You know it when they get here and you start playing, that's when you find out. When all of a sudden he's coming off the bench instead of starting. I haven't seen that. And so that's why, at least so far, I do like this group. I like this group a lot.
Can you speak about the quality of teams you played in Italy, whether it's national or?
It's a great question. You can cater your trip to what you want it to look like. What it does, it affects the price a little bit. So you can say, like, at this point, we're healthy at the end of the summer. We want to have a great trip, and we want to beat the tar out of everybody we play. And so, because I want to play 13 or 15 players. So you'll get over there, and we want to stay healthy, don't get hurt in the game, and let's play somebody bad. So even if we play okay, we're going to win by 50. And that's what some people do, because you get the 10 additional practices before you go. So you've almost gotten out of the summer what you already wanted before you go on the trip. And you're going to get the sightseeing. So, it's just going to be about, 80 minutes, 40 minutes for 2 games. If we not get hurt, this is going to be great. Ours was, one game was a little bit of that, even though we didn't ask for it. One of the teams wasn't very good. I mean, I thought we played okay, and we won by 40. Our second game, I thought we played quite well and won that one by like 45. The second team was a semi-pro team. They had 3 or 4 guys on their team that play in the B leagues in Europe. So they were good. We just played really well in that game. But to your question, your point, for example, the University of Houston went on a foreign tour, and they played the Australian national team. The Australian national team is like the 3rd best team in the world. So their Houston is a good team. They got beat by 30 in one of their games. And so his may be, I want some of these guys to be brought down maybe with their big head, perhaps. Like, I want somebody to get slapped before we get slapped. And now we're 0-1. Let's get them slapped when it's in the summer. What that does is it drives up the cost. So where that cost comes in is our trip was about it was about $5,500 per person. So also we take 30 people, $5,000, it's a $150,000 trip. If we wanted to play somebody like the Australian national team, that might be a $15,000 trip per person. What they do is the company that organizes it, they will entice those pro players with that extra money and say, we'll pay you. I know your training camp doesn't start till September 1st, but if you'll come back for 2 weeks early on August 15th and play Houston these 2 games and Duke these 2 games, we'll give you $25,000. And so what they do is they'll charge you more money and then turn it to those pro players. When Houston comes to town, they'll charge Duke more money, give them some when they come to town. So some of those pro guys will say, all right, I'm not coming back for no money. And then, well, we're gonna give you 20 grand for 4 games. Yeah, I'll be there 2 weeks early. And so it can affect, it can drive up the cost for your trip real fast. Other questions? Yes.
Has there been any benefit for Group 5 teams with NIL? And
Yes.
Transfer portal changes? Those benefits.
Benefits, yes. Are there downsides? Yes. It's probably like most things. They're the pros and the cons. It's asking about the benefits of the NIL and transfer portal for the Group of 5 conferences, Group of 5 teams outside of the Power 5, SEC, the Big 12, the ACC. Where do you land? Where do we land in terms of, are we seeing benefit or are we seeing it's more detrimental? So far it's been pretty good for us. It makes it chaotic. It's difficult to navigate, but because, in my opinion, of where we are in the pecking order, we can get the so-called, we got both down transfers and up transfers, no pun intended, because we're in the middle. You know, Middle Tennessee, we are kind of in the middle to where we had a young man transfer from the University of Iowa, the 6'11", 305-pound kid, because he was the second and the third string center at Iowa, most played one. Well, he's not going to transfer because he was a top 100 player and he's coming from the Big Ten. He doesn't want to go here. He wants to maybe take a half a step or a step backwards, but he still wants to feel like he's playing big time college basketball. So you get that young man that says, I'm gonna go back just a little so I can play them. On the flip side, we got a young man from Mississippi Valley State. He was the second leading scorer at their school, averaged 11 points a game, shot 48% from 3. It's not a whole lot of people to game. You know, I'm not getting NIL. We don't play in front of thousands of people. Our facilities aren't that nice. I want to transfer up. Well, you could transfer all the way to Mississippi State, but you may be sitting on, may never get in the game. I'm not sure I want to do that. So for us, we've kind of gotten in this class, 2 up transfers and 1 down transfer. So the transfer portal has helped us there. We also lost 4 guys to the transfer portal. One of our graduates transferred to Texas A&M. He was our leading scorer last year, but all of a sudden he wants to see if he can play in the SEC. And I'm sure he's getting a good chunk of change for an NIL deal to play there as well. Some of our other guys that transferred out, they transferred down. One went to a Division II school, wanted to play more minutes. We had one that transferred to UT Martin, wanted more minutes. So we lost some guys that are good guys. Love having them in our program. They just either wanted a bigger stage or more minutes. But the guys that we brought in, they too wanted a bigger stage or more minutes. So there really hasn't been we're losing everybody. We can't get anybody in. There is such a level. You go down just to like low major guys. As soon as you have a player have a great year, he's gone. He's gone. And it's really difficult to get those guys replaced. From an NIL standpoint, it's going to be increasingly difficult to keep up with the Joneses. Because now through NIL, for instance, we were talking at our table at Florida State for their football team. The football team now back in the top 5 in the country. All of their starters in football make $100,000 minimum. And all their backups make $50,000 minimum. They have 6 starters that make over $1 million each. And they have 14 guys that make more than every coach on their staff other than the head coach. That's to think that we're going to be able to keep up with those kind of dollars. You're just not going to. But what it does do with what we give, we can separate ourselves from UT Chattanooga, perhaps in a recruiting battle, or at least be able to it may not be the reason we get guys, but it won't be the reason that we don't. And it's kind of like your facility, the locker room. It's got to be, it can't be the reason. I don't want it to be the reason they come. If they're coming here because of how nice our locker room is, and it's okay, or if they're coming here because of the NIL deal that we're giving them, then those guys don't turn out very well. I don't want them to not come because we're so far behind with our facilities. I don't want them to not come because we're not giving them anything and others are. But I don't want that to be the sole reason for them coming to Middle Tennessee. Yes, sir.
So how does this NIL conversation relate to their amateur status?
Not a great question. I almost feel like we shouldn't call ourselves NCAA. Because the NCAA, obviously, the 2A stand for Amateur Association. Now, part of the terminology is that it is not pay for play. That it is not pay for play. What it is intended to do is say that anybody in here who owns your business, that you see value, whether it's through a commercial, a billboard, coming to your office, speaking to your clients, that I see value in my business being associated with the quarterback. Because he's a great young man, he's popular, so if he likes and is touting what we do here with our business, it's going to attract more business. And so, because it is above board money now, it does not affect their amateurism. So what you have to do is you go into, it's a contract, just like the contract that you draw up with anybody else. We're going to give you this amount of dollars, and in return, here's what you're going to do for us. And so we have players that are under that scenario right now, that we're going to pay you this amount of money at the end of every month for 10 months. And in return, over that 10-month period, we need you to, when you come to our restaurant and eat, we just want you to take a picture of yourself with your food, with your camera, and post it on all your social media sites. Anytime that we have a VIP reception for our clients, we need you to be there. And you just need to show up to 4. We do it once a month. We need you to be at 4 of the 10. Any way you want to write it up says the company or the person with that athlete, as long as they're holding up to their end of that obligation, then it is above board. And at that point, they say, this is not pay for play. You feel like your business is benefiting by going into the agreement with them.
Is it just individual businesses, or do y'all have, is there a collective, not y'all? Is there a collective involved that helps?
Great question. Both. What she's asked, the collective is, we could say you are a former athlete at Middle Tennessee, and we want you to run our collective. And so what you do is go around and talk to as many business leaders and the power brokers to be, and there's a pot of money, and you run it. We can't. That's the intention of the collective, is that you are going to all the businesses, and what it turns into, particularly at the big level, it's a race between you and Dr. McPhee to get to the money. And you and Chris Massaro to get to the money people, and you and Lee Daly on to get to the money people. Because the Sidney McPhee's want it for the university. The Chris Massaros want it perhaps for scholarship dollars. Lee Daly on may want it for buildings to go up, and you want it so the football team has got the best players. Well, there's finite dollars out there. So what happens is you're running a collective, and so now you have say-so, and we're hearing that quarterback B that you're recruiting is going somewhere between $200,000 and $300,000. And so there are places that have massive whiteboards, and there are recruits' names with all beside them. And so if we can get this guy for 500. But now here's what's left in the pot. Now that means these guys are off the board. You can't get them. At least you can't afford it. And what happens is the coach is like, how much is left in there? Well, here's what it is. Well, that ain't enough to go get this guy. We're in his top 2. We're gonna need such and such amount of dollars to go get it. So now you go back to the drawing board, back to business people, we're gonna need a little more, or we're gonna miss out on this guy. And so now you got a choice to make. Are you gonna go find more, or are you moving on to player B, or C, or D? So that's kind of how the collective is. The NIL deals, through specific or individual businesses, the Boulevard could approach somebody and say, listen, we've seen you over here a lot, you always bring your teammates in. You've always got a good look about you, and we just love how you represent the town, the team, the university. Every time you come in for, we'll give you twice a month, dinner's on us. And in addition to that, we're gonna give you $5,000 to bring other people over here with us. We're gonna give you $500 a month for 10 months. And so keep doing what you're doing, keep bringing people that act and talk and look like you, and it will help our business to be associated with you. That's another way to work an NIL. And car companies are doing it. So they say, here's a car. We want you, every time you get in that car, every time you get it washed, take a picture of yourself with the tag, our tag on that front bumper, and how you love driving that Ford from Ford of Murfreesboro. How you love driving that GMC of Murfreesboro. And we think because you drive one, it makes it cool. And so now we get to sell more cars because it's a cool car, because you're the starting point guard for our team. And so the business has to decide, do we think that's worth it? It's a race all the time, but very good questions. Any other questions? What's that? Oh, man. We've got a couple of former players that have graduated just in the last couple of years that have said like, man, I graduated a year or two too early. It ain't great. But yeah, we've got some faculty.
I'm a YouTube channel. We had one of our best players decided to come back. And it may be a little bit of both. You don't know if it really was
Genuine or that?
or did we finally, did they collective find enough money to make it worth this time to say, okay, maybe I'm not gonna be a top 15
Draft pick.
right now, but
1,000%. 1,000%.
where would that then get gone?
They would have gone. And I'll touch on that point real quick. I know my time's out and running short. But that is why you see some of the fringe prospects, whether it's in baseball, football, basketball, choosing to stay longer in college. And some people say that the product's better because that guy would have made a mistake on an NBA a year too soon. So the proponents or the opposite side of it says, you know what, that young man made a mistake. He stayed a year longer now. So now he does have a degree. And the team out on the floor is better because he stayed. And so the flip side of it is that, like, yeah, we were talking at our table before we ate, the starting center for Kentucky basketball, Oscar Sheboy, last year made $2 million. Well, most people thought he'd be a late second round draft pick, less money than that. He would have been in the NBA or signed an NBA contract, but wouldn't have made as much money as the other ones did going back to Kentucky. And so, it's another year, you got more money and a further year of education. Now, was Kentucky better? I don't know, but there's just like the transfer portal, the NIL it's got its flaws, the pros to it, the cons to it. And because of all those changes at once, it has become a very different profession than it was just 3 or 4 years ago. It's quite hectic all the time. Yes, ma'am. Anything else? Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Coach. I tell you, Coach, between you and Coach Stockstill talking about the transfer portal and NIL, I mean, we have learned so much from y'all talking about this. It's unbelievable. How do you keep Coach Stockstill away from that 300-pound, 6'11" player? I mean, so but anyway, Well, thank you for coming. Everybody appreciate all y'all coming today. It was great to see you. And we will see y'all again next week.